The South China Sea, an expansive body of water spanning over 3.5 million square kilometers, has often been referred to as the throat of global commerce. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, roughly one-third of global shipping, valued at over $3 trillion, passes through its waters annually. Renowned historian Geoffrey Blainey, in his seminal work, The Tyranny of Distance, poignantly encapsulated the strategic importance of maritime routes and choke points, with the South China Sea serving as a prime example in the contemporary era. This maritime region's significance is not just tied to global commerce. Beneath its waters lie vast, untapped reserves of natural resources. As noted by the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the South China Sea holds proven oil reserves of at least 7 billion barrels and an estimated 900 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. These figures have led scholars like Robert D. Kaplan in his book Asia's Cauldron to draw parallels between the South China Sea and the oil-rich Middle East, particularly in the context of their geopolitical implications. However, it's not merely the allure of resources or strategic trade routes that elevates the South China Sea's importance on the world stage. It is, in fact, the overlapping territorial claims that have turned this maritime heartland into a crucible of geopolitical tension. As Kissinger remarked in World Order, territorial disputes can evoke primal emotions, and the South China Sea is no exception. China's 9-line claim has especially been a flashpoint, with countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan all positing conflicting territorial assertions. In essence, the South China Sea is not just a body of water. It's a nexus of global interests, economic ambitions, and deep-seated nationalistic fervors. The intertwining of these factors makes it one of the most contentious and consequential geopolitical arenas in the 21st century. Delving into the annals of history, the South China Sea has always been more than just a body of water. It has been a nexus for cultural exchange, economic trade, and geopolitical maneuvering. In the words of the historian Fernand Braudel, the seas have been the matrix of civilization. The South China Sea stands as a testament to this observation. From the days of the Maritime Silk Road, a network of sea routes that connected China's southern ports to Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, Arabia, and East Africa, the South China Sea served as a crucial conduit. As detailed in Louise Levatha's When China Ruled the Seas during the Ming Dynasty, Admiral Zheng He's treasure fleets embarked on 7 ambitious voyages, passing through the South China Sea to reach distant lands. These voyages were not just maritime explorations, but diplomatic missions, establishing tributary relations and forging alliances. Beyond the Chinese sphere, other civilizations also left their indelible marks on the region. The Srivijaya Empire, based on Sumatra in present-day Indonesia from the 7th to the 14th centuries, controlled the strategic Strait of Malacca and maintained a dominant naval presence in the South China Sea. Similarly, the Champa Kingdom of Central Vietnam was another maritime power that asserted its influence. Ancient claims in the South China Sea were more fluid than they are today. While the concept of sovereignty as we understand it in the Westphalian sense was not prevalent, historical records and artifacts, such as pottery shards and shipwrecks, attest to a vibrant tapestry of trade, migration, and occasional skirmishes. For example, the Paracel and Spratly Islands, the flashpoints of many modern territorial disputes, have been historically referenced in various accounts.
The South China Sea, I don't think they've handled it very well anyway, to be honest with you. I don't think they're very clear what they want. There's various different agencies in China that are responsible for the South China Sea, and they actually speak with different voices.
Chinese records from the Tang and Song dynasties mention these islands, but there are also references in Vietnamese annals and maps dating back to their early dynastic periods. Yet, as the historian Julian Go notes in Patterns of Empire, the imposition of European colonial frameworks in the 19th and 20th centuries fundamentally transformed how territories were claimed and borders drawn. The South China Sea was no exception. As European powers delineated their spheres of influence, they introduced a modern paradigm of territoriality, inadvertently sowing the seeds for the geopolitical contests of the present day.
That's my feeling, that the South China Sea situation will continue to simmer but not boil over.
As we transition from the historical to the contemporary, the South China Sea's narrative becomes one of competing territorial claims, each anchored in historical assertions and nationalistic ambitions. As Samuel P. Huntington remarked in The Clash of Civilizations, the borders of nations often become flashpoints of conflict. And in the South China Sea, these borders are frequently fluid, contested, and overlapping. The heart of China's claim in the South China Sea lies within the ambiguously demarcated 9-dash line. This line, appearing first on Chinese maps in the 1940s, envelopes nearly 90% of the South China Sea, stretching far from the mainland and close to the coasts of other claimant states. China often roots its claims in historical voyages, ancient maps, and archaeological findings. For instance, Beijing references the voyages of Admiral Zheng He and older dynastic records as evidence of historical Chinese presence and thus sovereignty. Furthermore, as Bill Hayton posits in The South China Sea, The Struggle for Power in Asia, China's claims are not merely territorial, but deeply intertwined with nationalistic sentiments and the narrative of historical rights. Manila's claims in the South China Sea center predominantly around the Scarborough Shoal and the Spratly Islands. The Philippines' arguments are based on geographical proximity and historical interactions. The Scarborough Shoal, known locally as Bajo de Masinloc, has been reflected in Philippine maps since the late 18th century. Moreover, the Treaty of Paris, 1898, and subsequent American colonial-era treaties are cited to validate Philippine sovereignty over parts of the Spratly Islands. Hanoi's claims over the Paracel and Spratly Islands are rooted in historical records and continuous administrative actions. Vietnam cites ancient texts and maps dating back to the Nguyen dynasty to assert its historical connections to both island groups. The contention between China and Vietnam over the Paracels came to a head in 1974 with a brief but significant naval skirmish, resulting in Chinese control of the archipelago. Both nations staked their claims on parts of the Spratly Islands based on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS principles, emphasizing their exclusive economic zones, EEZ. For Malaysia, features like Swallow Reef have been developed and maintained for maritime and aviation purposes. Brunei, in its subdued claim, focuses on Louisa Reef, citing its EEZ and continental shelf rights. Despite its distinct political trajectory from the People's Republic of China, Taiwan's claims in the South China Sea closely mirror those of Beijing, largely a legacy of the post-World War II period, when the Republic of China first made the 11-dash line claim, which was later reduced to the 9-dash line. Taiwan maintains a notable presence on Taiping Island, the largest of the Spratly Islands. While Indonesia doesn't claim any of the disputed islands, tensions have arisen due to China's 9-dash line overlapping with Indonesia's EEZ near the Natuna Islands. While traditionally maintaining an outsider stance in recent years, skirmishes between Chinese vessels and Indonesian Navy near the Natunas have heightened concerns. As observed by Donald E. Weatherby in Indonesia in ASEAN, Vision and Reality, Indonesia's strategic positioning often forces it into a delicate balancing act. In sum, the South China Sea is more than just a geopolitical chessboard. It's a reflection of the age-old tensions between history and modernity, national pride and international law, ambition and reality.
I think China is serious about this. I think Indonesia, being the farthest away from China, probably has experienced some of the least coercion. But quite clearly, China is intending to throw its weight around.
As the claims and counterclaims in the South China Sea grew more convoluted, the imperatives of international law and diplomacy assumed greater prominence. To disentangle the territorial web and ensure peaceful coexistence, nations turned to structured legal frameworks and multilateral forums. Often referred to as the Constitution for the Oceans, UNCLOS, ratified in 1982, sought to establish a comprehensive legal framework for the world's seas and oceans. Central to the South China Sea discourse are its provisions on territorial waters, exclusive economic zones, EEZs, and continental shelves. As Elizabeth Mann Borges writes in The Oceanic Circle, UNCLOS was a significant stride toward maritime governance, one that attempted to harmonize sovereign rights with international obligations. Under UNCLOS, coastal states are entitled to territorial seas extending up to 12 nautical miles from their coasts and have rights to exploit resources within a 200 nautical mile EEZ. These stipulations are pivotal for countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia when justifying their territorial claims. However, UNCLOS also grapples with features like islands, rocks, and atolls, the classification of which can impact maritime entitlements. Such nuances become contentious in areas like the Spratly Islands, where the distinction between islands and rocks significantly influences the extent of territorial waters and EEZs. This landmark ruling emerged as one of the most significant legal determinants concerning the South China Sea disputes. In 2013, following heightened tensions with China, the Philippines initiated an arbitration case under UNCLOS's dispute settlement mechanism, challenging several of China's claims and actions in the South China Sea. In July 2016, the tribunal issued its award, bringing forth several critical determinations. One, it rejected China's 9-dash line as having no legal basis under UNCLOS. Two, many of the features in the Spratly Islands were classified as rocks, not islands, thus not entitled to EEZs or continental shelves of their own. 3, China was found to have violated the Philippines' sovereign rights within its EEZ, especially concerning fishing and resource exploitation. 4, China's large-scale land reclamation and construction of artificial islands were deemed harmful to the marine environment, violating UNCLOS provisions. The tribunal's decision, while legally binding, lacked enforcement mechanisms.
The Philippines strongly affirms its respect for this milestone decision as an important contribution to ongoing efforts in addressing disputes in the South China Sea.
China rejected the ruling, emphasizing its non-participation in the arbitration process and continued to underscore its historical rights. The intricate dance between legal assertions and geopolitical realities in the South China Sea underscores a broader tension in international relations. The juxtaposition of international law's ideals against the pragmatic intricacies of state interests.
你非常准确地描述了中方的立场，因为我们确实是不承认，从一开始就不承认、不接受，所以呢，也不会跟这个所谓的非法的仲裁庭，发生任何可能产生法律上意义的司法，程序上的关系，我们也不会接受，他提供的所谓的任何的，不管是什么样的裁。
As E.H. Carr astutely noted in the 20 Years Crisis, while the structures of law and diplomacy provide a framework, the dynamics of power and perception inevitably shape outcomes. Beyond the immediate territorial disputes and the legal wrangling lies the South China Sea's overarching significance in global geopolitics. This stretch of water, surrounded by rapidly developing economies, represents a nexus of trade, resources, and strategic maneuvering. The South China Sea is undeniably one of the world's most critical maritime arteries. Acting as the gateway between the Pacific and Indian Oceans, it connects the dynamic economies of East and Southeast Asia with the energy-rich Middle East, Africa, and the broader global market. According to the International Energy Agency, approximately 1/3 of the world's maritime trade flows through its waters. This includes a significant proportion of global oil shipments, making it an essential energy lifeline for major economies, especially China, Japan, and South Korea. Dr. Robert D. Kaplan, in his book Asia's Cauldron, underscores this, noting that the South China Sea is to China what the Caribbean once was to the U.S. a body of water crucial for its commercial and naval supremacy. Beyond its function as a trade conduit, the South China Sea is endowed with abundant natural resources. Its fisheries are among the most productive in the world, supporting the livelihoods of millions in the surrounding countries. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the South China Sea accounts for a significant portion of the global fish catch, making it a critical food security zone. Yet, beneath its azure waters lies another treasure: vast reserves of hydrocarbons. While exact figures remain subjects of debate, the U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates the South China Sea to hold approximately 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in proven and probable reserves. Some Chinese estimates are even more optimistic. These reserves, if tapped efficiently, could transform the energy landscape of Southeast Asia, reducing dependency on Middle Eastern oil and further intertwining the economies around the sea. The tranquil waves of the South China Sea belie an undercurrent of rising militarization and tensions. This region, once dominated primarily by fishing boats and commercial vessels, now witnesses warships, fighter jets, and military installations, reflecting a new era of strategic competition. China's land reclamation activities in the South China Sea have been the most conspicuous aspect of the region's militarization. Starting around 2013, China embarked on a massive project to transform reefs, atolls, and shoals, particularly in the Spratly Islands, into larger landmasses capable of supporting military infrastructure. Mischief Reef, Subi Reef, and Fiery Cross Reef have been among the most significantly expanded. On some of these artificial islands, satellite imagery, as cited by the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, reveals airstrips long enough to accommodate fighter jets, advanced radar facilities, missile shelters, and deep water ports.
China has been creating artificial islands in the South China Sea and turning them into military bases. It is attempting to solidify its claims to the strategically vital waters of the South China Sea inside the so-called Nine-Dash Line. It is doing this for economic, military, and domestic political reasons.
While China's efforts are the most extensive, it's worth noting that other claimants, like Vietnam and the Philippines, have also developed features they control, albeit on a much smaller scale. As militarization progressed, the waters of the South China Sea have become a stage for strategic signaling and posturing, occasionally leading to skirmishes. In 2001, a U.S. Navy EP-3 surveillance plane and a Chinese jet fighter collided off Hainan Island, leading to a significant diplomatic standoff after the American plane made an emergency landing in China and its crew was detained.
I want to emphasize that the truth is that the US side stirred up troubles and made provocation first, while the Chinese side dealt with this in accordance with corresponding laws and regulations.
The Scarborough Shoal standoff in 2012 between Chinese and Philippine vessels marked a significant escalation. While initially a fishing-related dispute, it eventually saw both nations deploying naval assets, leading to heightened tensions. There have been multiple incidents involving U.S. naval vessels and Chinese ships, particularly during U.S. Freedom of Navigation operations, FONOPs, where the U.S. Navy sails close to disputed features to challenge excessive maritime claims. These operations have often been met with warnings and shadowing by the Chinese Navy or Coast Guard.
事实非常清楚，美方出于一己私利，抱持零和思维，不断在本地区加强军事部署，其结果必然是加剧局势紧张，危害地区和平稳定。地区国家应该深入地想一想，到底什么才是合适的，什么才是互利的，从而做出真正有利于自身利益、有利于地区和平稳定的选择。
Vietnam and China have also seen their share of confrontations. Notably, in 2014, China's placement of an oil rig, HD 981, in waters claimed by Vietnam led to a serious maritime standoff, with vessels from both sides reportedly ramming each other. The waters near the Natuna Islands have witnessed Indonesian authorities detaining Chinese fishing boats, with the Chinese Coast Guard sometimes intervening, reflecting the complexities even non-claimant states face. In the throes of escalating tensions, it's easy to overlook the persistent endeavors at peaceful resolution. However, amidst the militarization and sharp rhetoric, multilateral mechanisms and diplomatic dialogues have continuously worked to diffuse tensions and create a framework for cooperative engagement in the South China Sea.
I think the Philippines have every right to send their vessels, both commercial and military, anywhere they want in their exclusive economic zone, and China has no basis to claim that they need to remove it.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, has been at the forefront of multilateral efforts to address the South China Sea disputes. While the body itself doesn't possess an enforcement mechanism, its importance lies in providing a platform for dialogue and consensus building among its members and with external powers, especially China. The most notable ASEAN-centered initiative has been the push for a Code of Conduct, COC, in the South China Sea. Initiated in the early 2000s, the COC seeks to establish guidelines for behavior in the disputed waters, ensuring that nations avoid actions that could escalate tensions. The 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, DOC, was an initial step, emphasizing the principles of the UN Charter and international law, particularly UNCLOS. However, crafting a binding COC has proven challenging, given the varying interests of ASEAN member states and China's assertive posture. Still, negotiations have persisted, reflecting the collective acknowledgement of the COC's potential in stabilizing the region. While multilateral mechanisms set the broad framework, the specifics are often ironed out in bilateral settings. Post the 2016 Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling, there was a thaw in relations under Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who sought closer ties with Beijing. This shift saw both countries initiating bilateral consultation mechanisms, specifically for the South China Sea, exploring joint resource exploration and crisis management measures. Both nations, despite their contentious history, have maintained a series of talks. These dialogues, often held annually, focus on confidence building, maritime safety, and potential cooperative projects. Malaysia has often preferred quiet diplomacy, engaging China directly to address overlapping claims. Such engagements have emphasized shared interests and mutual economic benefits. While the road to a comprehensive resolution remains fraught with obstacles, the consistent pursuit of dialogue underscores the region's aspiration for a peaceful and cooperative maritime order. As former ASEAN Secretary General Surin Pitsuwan remarked, "The strength of ASEAN is its process, emphasizing the continuous and patient diplomacy at play. In understanding the South China Sea's dynamics, it's pivotal to recognize both the immediate tensions and the underlying efforts to navigate them. For every tale of a skirmish, there's a parallel narrative of dialogue, underscoring the region's multifaceted character and the enduring hope for peaceful coexistence." The ripples of the South China Sea disputes traverse far beyond its immediate waters, influencing the strategic calculus of global powers and reshaping the tenor of international relations in the 21st century. Here's how the South China Sea becomes a microcosm of larger geopolitical dynamics, with significant implications for the world's leading powers. The South China Sea, with its strategic waterways and evolving power dynamics, is pivotal to U.S. interests in the Indo-Pacific. While not a claimant state, the U.S. has consistently emphasized the importance of freedom of navigation and overflight. As the world's leading naval power, the U.S. Navy's freedom of navigation operations, FONOPs, are not just symbolic gestures but tangible assertions of its vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. The South China Sea also plays into broader U.S. concerns about China's rise. As pointed out in The Tragedy of Great Power Politics by John Mearsheimer, the interplay of a rising power and an established hegemon invariably leads to strategic competition. The militarization and territorial disputes in the South China Sea are emblematic of this larger Sino-American rivalry, where both powers seek to shape the region according to their strategic imperatives. Japan, heavily reliant on the free flow of goods and energy through the South China Sea, views the stability of this maritime region as crucial. Any disruption here threatens Japan's energy security and its economic vitality. While Japan doesn't have direct territorial stakes, it has been vocal about the rule of law and the importance of UNCLOS. Japan's proactive diplomacy, including capacity-building assistance to coastal Southeast Asian nations and joint exercises, underscores Tokyo's apprehensions about the changing status quo. As Shinzo Abe, Japan's former prime minister, often emphasized, Japan's proactive peace posture is intertwined with regional stability, especially in vital areas like the South China Sea. Australia finds itself in a delicate balancing act when it comes to the South China Sea. On one hand, its robust economic ties with China make it a significant stakeholder in the peaceful resolution of disputes. On the other hand, its long-standing strategic alliance with the US and shared democratic values with other regional players pull it towards a more assertive stance against any unilateral change to the maritime order. Australia's participation in multilateral naval exercises in the Indo-Pacific, including in proximity to the South China Sea, reflects its commitment to a rules-based regional order. The South China Sea, while geographically located in Southeast Asia, is a theater where global narratives intersect. As Dr. Henry Kissinger remarked in World Order, the intricacies of regional conflicts often draw in larger powers, not just because of immediate stakes, but due to the principles and order they represent. In a world marked by the interplay of globalization and geopolitics, the South China Sea stands as a testament to the complexities of international relations. The dynamics here, while rooted in historical and regional contexts, have profound implications for the trajectory of global power politics in the coming decades. The South China Sea, with its shimmering waters, has become the crucible for a multitude of intersecting interests, claims, and narratives. From deep historical roots to contemporary geopolitical aspirations, the intricacies of this maritime region stand as a reflection of the broader challenges our interconnected world faces today. It's more than just territorial disputes over islands and waters. It's a litmus test for international law, a gauge of great power rivalry, and a touchstone for regional cooperation. But as complex as the situation is, it's imperative to remember that the vast expanse of the sea itself signifies possibility. The possibility to navigate, negotiate, and find common ground. The stakes in the South China Sea are undeniably high. Yet, as history has shown us time and again, confrontations on such scales seldom benefit any party involved. Diplomatic channels, multilateral forums, and mutual respect for international laws and norms remain the beacon lights guiding nations toward peaceful coexistence. The ongoing dialogues, whether bilateral or under the auspices of ASEAN, show the collective yearning for a peaceful resolution, even amid the cacophony of competing interests. As vast and profound as the waters of the South China Sea are, so is the depth of the narratives that revolve around it. In our rapidly evolving world, staying informed and understanding the nuances behind headlines is more crucial than ever. Every wave in this sea tells a tale. Every diplomatic endeavor paints a picture of hope. Let's commit to deepening our understanding, fostering dialogues, and championing peaceful resolutions. Whether you're a student, a policymaker, or simply an engaged global citizen, your voice, your understanding, and your advocacy for peace can make a difference. In the immortal words of Mahatma Gandhi, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. Let that change be one of understanding, empathy, and commitment to a world where disputes are resolved not through might, but through dialogue and mutual respect. Thank you for journeying with us through the waters of the South China Sea. Stay curious, stay informed, and let's sail towards a brighter, more harmonious horizon together. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth coverage of more countries.